I have my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to the Guru Parampara, going all the way back to Lord Krishna, all the acharyas. And I offer my respectful obeisances to all of you. Vachakalpatarubhascha, Kripasindhabhya, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Lord Krishna is the best friend of all living entities. And He resides always within the heart, along with the living entity in the material world. His only objective in life is to benefit everyone, because Krishna is all good. There are various ways in which we, as souls, can move about the material and spiritual worlds. And in various situations, we feel relatively uncomfortable. For instance, in the material world, where there seems to be an endless number of things to fret about, to be euphemistic about it. And Krishna, out of His concern for all living beings, wants to give an opportunity to every soul to be with Him in the spiritual world, or connected to Him even in the material world. And those who are blissful and happy, despite whatever situations, conditions there are in the material world. Narayanak parak sarve nukutaschana pipyati swarga pavarga narakeshu apitulyar darshina. Lord Shiva had mentioned that the Vaishnavas are not hindered by any condition, because their only concern really is the happiness they give Krishna, which means that they're also happy to be engaged in service. However, the darkness of the material world means that the soul forgets about his constitutional position and becomes waylaid, the way a pedestrian might when there's fog, and not be able to see the way forward. For that purpose, out of a sense of compassion for all living beings, Krishna manifests Himself in various ways to help us in the material world. One of the ways that is celebrated, and we are celebrating today, is Vyāsa. Vyāsa means the editor, or the one who sorts out eternal information that benefits the souls, to present it in such a way that everyone can take advantage of it. For instance, Srila Vyāsadeva is known to have divided the one Veda into 4, and then given the task of disseminating that to various disciples so that it could be compartmentalized, and thus it could go out to more people. And in His concern for people to be able to understand the ultimate message of the Vedas, He compiles the Puranas, the Itihasas, Mahabharata, and all these literatures are meant simply to attract the attention of those who have forgotten about what their real interest is in life. And we know from Srimad Bhagavatam that Narada Muni, the spiritual master of Srila Vyasadeva, had met him at a time when Srila Vyasadeva was in crisis. He was not feeling satisfied in his work of disseminating the Vedas, and his guru Narada Muni told him that's because you have to adjust it a little bit. You've told people about non-fruitive work and about Atma Tattva, Gyan, knowledge of the self as separate from the body. But he said, Naishkarmyam apyapchuta bhava varjitam, nashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam, kutakpana shashvada bhadramishvare, nacharpitam karma yarapya karanam. And unless you include very clear, direct knowledge about the loving relationship that the soul has with Krishna, then it's very difficult for anyone to actually come out of the darkness of the material world. What to speak of the ways, he said to his disciple, that you've recommended karma kanda. He said, these types of teachings that you've given merely give everyone an excuse to try to double down on their attachment to the material world. So the Srimad Bhagavatam came from that conversation because Srila Vyasadeva then, by the order of his spiritual master, went back to his house in Shamyapras and there meditated, house surrounded by berry trees, no modes of material nature. And he went into a trance and was able to directly perceive the position of the living entity in relationship to the material world, and was also able to witness the activities of Krishna in the spiritual world. And then he came back with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Although he had sketched it out to some degree, it wasn't enough, and it became completed after his samadhi. His writings, his teachings after that are called Samadhi Bhashya. It's how you talk when you come out of samadhi. And we're the recipients of that, as mentioned by Shukadeva Goswami, who's the son of Srila Vyasadeva. Anarto pasanam sakshad bhakti yoga madhoksaje lokasya ajanato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. And that is that people don't know what the goal of life is, and therefore he's brought forward Srimad Bhagavatam to remind us. So thinking about the process of parampara with this context, the business of those who are following in the footsteps of the acharyas is to do good for others. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the Adi Lila of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that, where is it? First paragraph. Yeah. It's on the screen. Okay. This phrase that Prabhupada has included in his purport, I'll read it to you, you don't have to turn around. He is like a parent, that is, he's speaking about a representative of Vyasadeva and those who carry on the message of the parampara. He says, his spiritual master is not an enjoyer of facilities offered by his disciples. He is like a parent. Without the attentive service of his parents, a child cannot grow to manhood. Similarly, without the care of the spiritual master, one cannot rise to the plane of transcendental service. And to think about the juxtaposition, there's the parent and then the child. In infanthood, or how old are you now? Prahlad? Toddler. Maybe you're a little young for this example, but when a little baby sits and eats, the mother comes and feeds the baby by hand. And Nirakula was telling me that in the Ayurveda, it's mentioned that it's actually very healthy for the baby. It's part of the way the baby is able to take on the love of the mother and associates food with the mother and gets nourished. Our nourishment isn't just from the elements itself. Even modern science has proved this by saying and showing through studies that if you eat food that's super healthy but you don't like it, you don't even like to look at it, you're not able to absorb the nutrients. And this is borne out in the Ayurveda also. When mother feeds the baby with her own fingers, puts her fingers in the mouth of the baby and says, take this. And the baby is able to assimilate them and feels naturally happy. So the acharyas, the spiritual teachers, spiritual leader, is meant to take the lead of Srila Vyasadeva to decide how can I connect to soul to soul with someone else and hand feed them this information. And just like a parent also will take the food, whatever it is, and divide it up into really small pieces. Because baby can't chew that much. Little tiny mouth. Have to give a little teeny piece. Or maybe even you have to blend it up. Mothers are smiling. Maybe you have to make it into pablum. Whatever it is. What do babies eat? Fruit. Huh? Veggies. But you have to cream them. And like, here's a little something, tiny little bit at a time. And so the care that the great acharyas take is like that. And we're also to follow in their footsteps, to consider how to nourish ourselves, of course, but also in the mood of giving and passing on the parampara, we have to make it small enough so people can ingest it. And we also have to feed with our own fingers so that they feel nourished. It's a very loving relationship, like with a parent to a child. And therefore, we are given this task to both nourish ourselves through the teachings of Srila Vyasadeva, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when telling Sanatana Goswami about how to actually improve oneself, says that we don't automatically come out of the spell of the material nature, but by the sound vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam, then we can awaken. Maya mukta jivana nahi swata krishna gyan. He said it's not automatic. And so on this day of Shri Vyāsa Pujā, we worship Srila Vyasadeva and the whole disciplic succession and the whole idea of this nourishment through taking the transcendental teachings ourselves and also passing them on to as many people as possible. I was a recipient of this, and therefore I'm always feeling grateful and indebted, because I was sitting in my home minding my own business, but I was praying hard. I wanted to know what the ultimate goal of life was and how to attain it. And that, in an uncanny way, came right to my door, and it came as pablum. Perfect for me, a high school student in Northern California. And I was able to take that and become nourished by it. And I always remember wondering who did this, who went to the trouble to prepare this and put it into such a way that I would be attractive. And then I came to know the mood and method of Srila Prabhupada, which was that he was always looking for ways to make the message of Srila Vyasadeva available to the world. Consider that most of these literatures are written in Sanskrit. And at the time Prabhupada came to America, if you had gone and looked for the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll probably find it at Gita Press, which is hundreds of years old, probably. Somebody can tell me how many years. There's an archive of these transcendental literatures, but it's not available anywhere. And it's certainly not in a comprehensible way, certainly not with pictures of the spiritual world And Prabhupada's mood was that of a mother feeding the children. As we saw in this beautiful play earlier, the various characters came to life who came into the association of Prabhupada, and he fed them by hand, sometimes literally. Mukunda Maharaj writes about how when he held a feast in his loft, he invited people, he went around with the pot and the spoon, and his mantra was, take, take. Mukunda Maharaj remembers how he kept saying, take, take. I have some, take, take. And Prabhupada, in a nourishing way, in a loving way, gave this nourishing, most important lifeblood of every living entity, the connection to Krishna through the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I felt that, and therefore I have no doubt about the efficacy of the process, because I've seen it for myself. I was a recipient, and it was exactly custom-made and effective in every way. And therefore, and oftentimes, it's like when you try to feed a baby, the baby would say, I don't wanna. None of that. A parent has to be tolerant and trying to find some other way. Here comes the airplane. And sometimes, if feeding a baby, you have to make, not sometimes, you always have to make some special arrangement so that flying projectiles don't do that much damage. And there's sometimes a mess. One has to tolerate these things. So everyone's eligible for the process of bhakti yoga, and Srila Prabhupada, like a mother, invited everybody to come and was extremely protective of his children. One example is that a senior member in another Gaudiya group, one of Prabhupada's godbrothers actually, it has a good ending, but in the very beginning, when Prabhupada had come to India with his new babies, and some of them were cooking, one of the senior members had shunned the prasadam. He said, no, I can't eat food cooked by a mlecha. And Prabhupada, of course, pointed out that once somebody becomes a Vaishnava, they transcend any kind of designation. But later on, the same godbrother was in need of a loan and knew that ISKCON had money, so he asked, and Prabhupada wrote back a note saying, it would be fine, but only one problem. This money is collected by mlechas. And I don't want to contaminate you by giving you this money. As I say, there was reconciliation through this and other exchanges and recapitulation. And another time, Prabhupada was on a walk, and an Indian gentleman had noted that during a Janmashtami ceremony, one of his, again, godbrothers had been critical and was saying that these Americans are like black sheep. And he said they've been kicked out of Japan for the way they've been conducting themselves. And one of the devotees from the Japan party said, well, but Prabhupada, that's not true. And Prabhupada said, that's all right. And then he told a story. He said, once a man was telling an associate that I lost 10,000. And then the other man said, well, at least you had 10,000 to lose. And Prabhupada said, even if we were kicked out of Japan, at least we were there. And then he said to the Indian gentleman, who was a friend, he said, did you tell this person that he's a pamara? Pamara means a localized person. Prabhupada said a pamara means one like a fly who seeks soars, and a honeybee looks for the sweetness. A fly seeks the source. He said, did you tell him he's a pamara? And he said, no, Prabhupada, I didn't say that. He said, then you go back and you tell him, I forgot to tell you one thing. And what is that? It's like, you were a pamara because you had looked for the faults. In this way, almost in a half-joking way, Prabhupada was defending his spiritual children. And this is also the duty of a parent, that taking personal responsibility for each one to come to maturity in Krishna consciousness, as Prabhupada writes in the purport that we just read. It's not dry, nor is it simply institutional, although that aspect is important as well. But it's a heart-to-heart relationship that we develop with those who are in parampara. And the more that is there, the more there's an inkling for someone to become attached to spiritual association and the spiritual practice. Otherwise, it becomes dry. We have to have loving exchanges, and there has to be a heart-to-heart feeling that there's no motive here. It's only to follow in the footsteps of Krishna. How kind is Krishna? How loving is he to his devotees? We can think of the way he speaks to them. And this morning I was thinking about his words to Brahma. At the beginning of creation, here's his son and beloved servant. And he said, Pancha shloki mimam vidyam vatsatapvam dibodame prabhude jnana bhaktivyam atmayana chinmayi. You know this from the Brahma Samhita. And Vatsa means, oh my child. This is Krishna when he's speaking to Brahma. He calls him Vatsa. Vatsa means like calf. And it's an affectionate term that someone who has deep love for a child, for a disciple, will say. And that's how Krishna speaks. And we find elsewhere Shukadev calling Parikshit Anga, meaning that we're inseparable. You're part of me. Like it's a way of embracing the person through your speech and saying how much you care. So this is a caring operation, a caring process. And it's only through that care that we can actually become fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. It has to be a loving atmosphere. And that's what's been passed down to us, the mood all the way from Krishna through his representative Srila Vyasadeva. And Srila Prabhupada exhibited that also. He cared more how we did things than what we did. How you do is more important than what you do. Because ultimately, it's the mood of love and trust and helping everyone feel comfortable in worshiping Krishna and just to be in their constitutional position as a devotee. So we have a vision that this ISKCON of Silicon Valley and in general ISKCON itself, this was Prabhupada's vision that it would be a huge society. It is a society, but it would have in each place a family-like atmosphere where devotees are engaged in 6 loving exchanges and also working to bring other people into that loving network. Zadati pratigunati ghuyamakyati prichtiti punkte bojayate jaiva. These are 6 items of loving service: giving gifts, accepting gifts, revealing one's mind and confidence, and hearing others reveal their mind and confidence. You have to listen to show your affection and love, to listen to what other people are saying. and also giving prasadam and accepting prasadam. And Prabhupada writes in his purport that this is the method through which we started the Krishna consciousness movement, this mood of loving exchange, not just among our group. The whole group is all living entities. And how can we give them an opportunity to come into the loving network? Therefore, today is an extremely special day because we're all together. The mood is palpable. You've all come from, or many of you, from very long distances away and have worked into the wee hours of the night. You're hungry. But that's how we roll here in the Hare Krishna movement. Thank you very much for dedicating your lives to this loving network created by Krishna himself, maintained by Krishna himself through his representatives. Thank you for being kind to all living beings, kind to your families, to yourself, to people that you meet. We have to exemplify the disciplic succession by thinking of people as sacred beings, no matter what condition they're in now. They all have a history that goes back all the way to Krishna. And so we can expand this movement through this mood given to us by Prabhupada and by the disciplic succession, by Srila Vyāsadeva himself, by working together in loving service to try to help ourselves so we can help other people. You take care, I'll take care of me for you, and you take care of you for me. Right? Hare Krishna. You know I'm dying to go on for another hour and a half, but I'm not. Just a heartfelt, loving thank you to everybody who helped put on this festival. And if I start naming names, I'll leave someone else, but I'll just look at people from all over. And now we're going to the next part of our program.